Hey everybody and welcome back. Yesterday I did a 40-minute video on the death of George Floyd, a man who was killed in Minneapolis by police last week on Memorial Day, discussing the numerology of the incident and how it's related to a number of things. You can find that video linked down in the description below. Also below this video you'll find my post that I made today, which you'll see on the left side of your screen. And perhaps the most solid numerology of anything from this story connects back to the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And this is really quite clear when you think about it. Of course, in the late 60s, the assassination of Dr. King is what sparked a number of race riots all over the United States. Now, the death of George Floyd, who, if you watch the video, it certainly looks like he was murdered outright. This is now sparking more race riots here in the United States in the year 2020. Over the last couple days, a lot of interesting details have come out about George Floyd. One of which being that he was a porn actor. So if you trust somebody who's a porn star not to fake their death, then I question your judgment of morals. What also came out in the news the other day is that George Floyd worked with Derek Chauvin as a security guard at the same business. And it's alleged that they even worked the same shifts together. So these are all clues telling us that there's something more behind this news story. And perhaps, again, the most obvious of this is going to be the connection to Martin Luther King. So let's dive into this. So the first thing that stuck out to me is that Minneapolis, Minnesota is the land of 93, and I discussed this in yesterday's video. All their sports teams have 93 gematria. And this is because the city sits on the 93rd meridian. In the same cipher, Martin Luther King Jr. equals 93. Now, the assassination of Dr. King occurred in 1968, a significant number I'll talk about later on in this video, but what I want to point out is that in 1993, something else came up about this assassination. And it was alleged that Loyd Jowers, he appeared on ABC in the year 1993 to talk about alternate theories regarding the death of Dr. King. And of course, here we have the death of a man named George Floyd, and a man who was important in conspiracy theories surrounding the King assassination was Loyd Jowers. And of course, conspiracy theorist equals 93 as well. So the connection between Floyd and Loyd seems clear, but the numbers behind the names show even more. Notice how the name Jowers sums to 1725 in Jewish or Latin gematria. As I pointed out in yesterday's video, this ritual was related to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, which has the same digits. Jesus Christ summing to 1275, Jowers summing to 1725. Well, just yesterday we finally learned the birth date of George Floyd. It said that he was born on October 14th, 1973. This means on the date he died, he would have been exactly 17,025 days old, the same digits found in the gematria of Jowers. The man convicted of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. was named James Ray. Notice how James Ray has reverse gematria of 52. The name Loyd equals 52 in reverse ordinal. The name Loyd Jowers equals 52 in reverse reduction. Check out the date that Loyd Jowers died. May 20th, written 20/5 or 5/20, like the number 52. Well, if you measure from his date of death to the death of George Floyd on 5/25, you get exactly 20 years and 5 days. If you instead measure from the death of George Floyd to the assassination of Martin Luther King, you get a span of exactly 52 years and 52 days. In the alphabetic order, Loyd Jowers equals 146. This is the reverse value of Jesus Christ, 146, and George Floyd dying on the 146th day of a leap year. But there's some really interesting numbers that connect these men even further. If you measure from the birthday of Loyd Jowers to the birthday of George Floyd, you get 17,130 days. I often talk about these numbers being used in lying rituals. The word lie flipped upside down is 317, and in the language of gematria, this is 317 as well. Also notice the 146 in reduction, like Loyd Jowers 146. Amazing how this all ties together. But not only that, if you measure from the death of Loyd Jowers to the death of George Floyd, you get 7,310 days. The same digits. So in one of my posts that I made yesterday, I explained how Minneapolis, is the land of 93. Now this city, sitting on the 93rd meridian, Jesus crucified on the 93rd day of the year, God's Son 93, Nazareth, crucifix 93, our sun, an average of 93 million miles from Earth. So Minneapolis, Minnesota equals 93, Martin Luther King Jr. 93, Loyd Jowers, again, appearing on ABC in the year 93 to talk about conspiracy theories. And now on the date that George Floyd died, Loyd Jowers would have been 93 years old. He also would have been 187 days after his birthday. And how appropriate is this number? Remember, total eclipse equals 187. 187, known as the homicide code, the code of murder. And here we have a story about a police officer committing murder. And would you believe his badge number? Derek Chauvin, who was leaning on his neck, badge number 1087. Again, this is a Masonic ritual. Ancient accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry. If I can type that right this morning, something to 187. Certainly seems like they're a division of the Jesuit order, Society of Jesus 187. Also, an interesting note is that Loyd Jowers owned a business called Jim's Grill, which is 46 and 62. George Floyd died at the age of 46. He was from Houston, Texas, which equals 46 and 62. These are numbers of sacrifice. George Floyd, even born in the year 73. Also, measuring from the death of Loyd Jowers to George Floyd, you get a span of 20 years and 6 days, another sacrifice number. Now, there's several more interesting things connecting Dr. Martin Luther King to George Floyd, both of these men sparking race riots 52 years apart. The assassination occurred in Memphis, Tennessee, at Lorraine Motel. Notice how Memphis, Tennessee has Jewish gematria of 612. The dialing area code in Minneapolis is 612. Now the name George sums to 39 in reduction. Martin Luther King Jr. died at the age of 39. Notice how he was 2 months and 20 days after his birthday. Well, according to Loyd Jowers, he says a man named Earl Clark fired the fatal shot. on Martin Luther King. And this is strange because the guy who was convicted also had Earl in his name. But I want to point out how Earl Clark equals 220, killing Martin Luther King Jr. 2 months, 20 days after his birthday. He was also a lieutenant in the police force. Look at how Lieutenant Earl Clark equals 202. This is another number of ritual human sacrifice. Well, if you measure from the death of Martin Luther King to the birthday of George Floyd, you get exactly 2,020 days. And think about how George Floyd, dead in the year 2020, the date he died fell a span of exactly, without the end date, it was exactly 202 weeks, 0 days before the Great American Total Solar Eclipse. The date that the news story hit headlines was exactly 202 days before the 2020 total solar eclipse. Total solar eclipse equaling 202 in ordinal. Notice how total solar eclipse is 704 in Jewish gematria. 74, of course, the ordinal gematria of Jesus. Also the reverse value of Jesus Christ. This number is significant to his killing on the cross, as told in the gospel. Well, notice how Lieutenant Earl Clark also equals 740 in Jewish gematria, similar to the gematria of the man he supposedly killed, MLK Jr. This 64 is interesting. MLK Jr. winning the Nobel Peace Prize in the year 64. I believe he was born on a date with 64 numerology. Yes, he was. 64, a number of civil rights. 64. If I'm not mistaken, the Civil Rights Act was passed in 64 on a date with 92 numerology. And wow, this was a number I pointed out yesterday, 1139. Civil Rights Act, 1139. Twins equals 1139. In English gematria, crucifixion equals 1139. The governor of Minnesota in office for 1 year, 139 days, on Memorial Day. Now, there's even more alignments between these two men. You know, Martin Luther King, you should never really trust anybody who's a major figure when they change their name. Why would you change your name? Well, it's probably because of gematria, but worth pointing out that Michael King Jr. equals 231 in reverse. And yesterday we found the full name of George Floyd, George Perry Floyd, which sums to 231 in the same cipher. Notice how Michael King Jr. also equals 78. Well, the birthday they just gave us for George Floyd, October 14th, is the date that leaves 78 days in the year. And if you saw my video yesterday, you may recognize 78 as a significant number to this ritual. Think about how Steven Jackson, a former NBA player, is in the media calling George Floyd his twin. Well, Steven Jackson was born in the year 78. His full name is Stephen Jesse Jackson. This Jesse Jackson, another civil rights advocate, is currently 78 years old. He was born on a date with 78 numerology. George Floyd, killed by an officer named Chauvin, which equals 78, outside of a deli equals 78. It was filmed by Darnella Frazier, 78. His license plate equals 708. His death fell 70 months, 8 days after the death of Eric Garner, who was also choked out by police while yelling, "I can't breathe." The word crucified equals 78. Human sacrifice, 780. I hope you're noticing a trend here. Martin Luther King died a span of 287 days before his birthday. George Floyd's date of birth was the 287th day of the year. Without the end date included, Martin Luther King Jr. died 9 months, 11 days before his birthday. This is another number of ritual human sacrifice. The name George Floyd sums to 119, the reverse of 9/11. Did he die 6 months, 5 days after Loyd Jowers' birthday? I think he did. Yeah, look at that. So from the death of Loyd Jowers, the birthday of Loyd Jowers, November 20th, to the death of George Floyd is 6 months and 5 days. George Floyd, 65 in reduction. But finally, the kicker here. Measuring from MLK's assassination to the death of George Floyd, we get 625 months. In English gematria, human sacrifice equals 625. And the middle name that they gave George Floyd is Perry, which equals 625. So that's it on this post. Again, I invite you guys to check my blog out, which is linked down below in the description. I have 7 posts now on the death of George Floyd and how it's related to all these incidents. An NBA player from the Houston Rockets named Sleepy Floyd. I mentioned the Jesse Jackson and Eric Garner connections. Also, learn about how the Eclipse Crucifixion Code is coded into the Gregorian calendar and how the state of Minnesota was founded by that code. Something I wanted to point out from this post. Measuring from the first Great American Total Solar Eclipse to the death of George Floyd is exactly 1,440 weeks. I'm sorry, 144 weeks. But the number 1440 is a significant number in time. The word time equals 144. And there's 1,440 minutes in one day. This death was 144 days after the anniversary of Jacob Frye being sworn into office. And when you combine the names George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, you get 1440 in gematria. Well, what's also interesting is that Floyd, Iowa sums to 1440. What's Floyd, Iowa, you ask? Well, notice how the coordinates 4393 take you to Floyd County, Iowa, which is just south of Minnesota. And they say that Jesus Christ was crucified on the date April 3rd, the 93rd day of the year, 4393. I thought that was a really interesting thing, and there's some gematria connections between them too. Of course, the death of George Floyd also connected to Floyd Mayweather. And in my video yesterday, I focused a lot on the idea that George Floyd's death was exactly 202 weeks before the 2024 total solar eclipse. And Floyd Mayweather was born on the date 2/24, February 24th, and his name equals 224 in gematria. And now if you measure from George Floyd's last birthday to the date of his death, look at this, you get exactly 224 days. Furthermore, this is also 32 weeks and 0 days. And remember how George Floyd died in front of police cruiser 320. I thought I had this number somewhere. Well, I definitely had it in my slides yesterday, but it was police cruiser 320 that he died in front of. And Minnesota is the 32nd state added to the Union. Christ equals 32. Minnesota became a state on the 131st day of the year, which is the 32nd prime number. Crucifixion 131. And then I also wanted to mention the number 68 again. This was a big part of the Sleepy Floyd ritual. Remember, Sleepy Floyd was a member of the Houston Rockets. Houston Rockets was the team that George Floyd was a fan of. And the 93 season was Sleepy Floyd's last season with the Houston Rockets. And on the date this Floyd got put to sleep, Sleepy Floyd was 60 years and 80 days old. Crucifixion equals 68. The officer Derek Chauvin equals 68. This ritual related to basketball, 68. And now we're connecting this to the MLK assassination in the year 68. And would you believe the man who was convicted of the assassination was even arrested on 6/8/68? I wish you could make this stuff up, guys, but you really can't. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks to everybody who jumped in. Again, we got to blow this thing wide open and explain to people how they're protesting the wrong thing. Of course, a lot of these protesters are paid agitators, without a doubt, but a lot of anger, and we just have to make sure that that anger is channeled correctly in this crazy time. All right, guys, peace, love, God bless. We'll talk to you soon. See ya.